You've thought long and hard about it. You've looked at it from every angle that you could possibly think of, trying to find evidence that would contradict the hard and convicting truth that is invading your worldview. But after several evenings spent listening to Jordan Peterson's podcast on sexuality, you've decided to change some of your views. So, with the feeling that you're about to make an important announcement, you post a tweet about your changed views, expecting thoughtful feedback, sympathy, maybe even support. But in dreadful astonishment, you later open your Twitter account to find a host of angry and bitter tweets in response to your post. Some of your friends have unfollowed you, and others have denounced you. This scenario is known by one infamous label: cancel culture. Cancel culture has developed and morphed over the decades to fit a continually changing culture. Today, it is the judge and jury of social media and has hijacked the great highways of communication within our country. It has undermined fair argumentation, reasonable discussion, and tolerance for differing political opinions. It is most powerfully exercised by leftist big tech companies who are able to manipulate and exclude certain opinions from social media. Its development on social media is interestingly fueled by a lack of community. But the other more important factor initiating its growth is a shift in the common view of cultural morality. As a result of the baseline for cultural morality largely shifting from the actions of the individual to the thoughts of the individual, vigilante justice in the form of cancel culture has become increasingly prevalent and has developed into a mentality that not only ruins careers, but that is contrary to free speech and social change. Before I dive into the major forces behind cancel culture, I first need to define a few terms and clarify my intentions. Cancel culture is defined as a way of behaving in a society or group, especially on social media, in which it is common to completely reject and stop supporting someone because they have said or done something to offend you. It's often called public shaming. However, it can also refer to initiatives taken outside of social media. Some call-outs happen when the public rally to end an individual's career or prominence in society to hold them accountable for immoral behavior. One example is a commentator losing his job. Canceling will also occur when an individual expresses views that contrast with those of mainstream media. According to the Cambridge English Dictionary, cancel culture has its place. It helps to call out and remove problematic people from mainstream culture. But what is mainstream culture? Mainstream culture is widespread, the culture of most people and the normal way of action. Mainstream cultures are typically disseminated by mass media. The most impactful members of mainstream culture, and therefore the major force behind cancel culture, are millennials and members of Gen Z. The reasons for this go beyond each of their moral and political opinions and stem from the psychology behind human behavior. In this speech, I will focus on cancel culture primarily as it pertains to politics. I'll first show you how cancel culture has gained so much traction in the United States, and outline several arguments for the benefits of cancel culture in American society. I will then make it my priority to refute such arguments, show you how cancel culture is contrary to free speech and social change, and enlighten the topic with a Christian perspective. My eventual goal will be to show you the importance of not engaging in cancel culture and to show you how to oppose it. Cancel culture is largely the result of a growing need for community among millennials and members of Gen Z. Humans need humans. This is not rocket science. Since creation, humans have always thrived better in tight-knit communities. A group of people who have each other's backs, who look out and support and care for one another, is necessary for the human psyche. This type of community could be town, tribal, or village-based, religion-based, family-based, or country-based. However, because of the gradual decrease in religion in America over the last few decades, because our country's nationalism is no longer a unifying cause, and because a large percentage of Americans are from broken families, many millennials and members of G are looking elsewhere to fulfill their needs for community. Best-selling author of Live Not by Lies, Rod Dreher, makes the argument that, quote, social justice fulfills the same psychological and emotional needs that religion once filled, but no longer can. People behind cancel culture are those that see themselves as part of a woke community, who want to identify themselves as part of that community and so act out their group membership. Expressing anger at someone who commits a moral infraction demonstrates loyalty to a group, and uniting against a common perpetrator demonstrates loyalty to the group's values. Millennials and Gen Zers are trying to create this community-like bonds over social media by uniting against a common enemy. This fuels cancel culture, especially when combined with other more selfish motives. Calling someone out on social media is generally a signal of one's own moral superiority, and as a result, the action is generally pleasing and satisfactory. The podcast Invisibilia once interviewed the primary initiator of a social media call-out, who reportedly said that calling out gave him, quote, a rush of pleasure. This can be ascribed to the fact that condemning wrongdoers implies that one is above such moral transgressions, a better person. By publicly calling someone out on social media, one establishes their moral credentials and identifies themselves as part of the community that shares their beliefs. This type of social pressure is good for society. In fact, it is a common belief that cancel culture is the only way minorities can make themselves heard and bring about social justice. Pavel Plinish, a chef from DC and a rabid proponent of cancel culture, stated in an interview with BBC News that, quote, using social media to bring attention to actions they don't agree with is the only way to create consequences for those who have more power in society. So minorities with little political or social leverage can use cancel culture to bring attention to actions they don't agree with, and other more influential academics make the same argument. April Alexander, a professor of psychology at the University of Denver, states that, quote, people have learned over time and over decades that sometimes you need to make a little bit of noise on social media in order for some people to be held accountable. Social media has become the outlet for oppressed minorities. And cancel culture, many believe, is their only weapon to combat more socially powerful individuals. So it has become an equalizer, a force that propels the freedom of speech and diversity, especially among minorities. But if we look closer at the actual nature of cancel culture, what it actually does, we will see that it does the exact opposite. Many public influencers believe that cancel culture is beneficial to society because it is a kind of purifying force in society, removing from influence those whose views do not align with mainstream culture. However, mainstream culture should not be the baseline for cultural morality. According to Rob Henderson, a writer for Psychology Today, quote, it can be a tool for social justice, instilling new values of equality and destroying dangerous precedent. But the majority decide what this dangerous precedent is, as well as who needs to be removed from influence. This doesn't do too many favors for minorities or the free discussion of ideas. Here's an example. Mainstream culture is typically dominated by an underlying current of radical egalitarianism. Radical egalitarianism is a system of political philosophy which goes further than equal rights and opportunities and seeks to make society like a race where every person finishes together in a tie at the finish line. Aaron Wildofsky, the author of The Rise of Radical Egalitarianism, neatly isolates the obstacle facing free cultural discussion on college campuses in an article when he states, quote, what is correct? Radical egalitarianism. Who decides? Radical egalitarians. How do they decide? By determining among themselves which actions support greater equality of condition and pressuring other campus constituencies to comply with their demands. The bigger problem here is that this type of circular reasoning has become more and more difficult to overcome. Because arguing against greater equality of condition subjects critics to charges of racism and sexism, but also because arguing against equality in any form makes Americans uncomfortable. Yet, challenging equality of condition as the most moral standard of judgment is necessary to preserve freedom of speech and inquiry on the public forum. Moreover, manipulation of mainstream thought through control of mass media by only a few groups within society does not represent the free cultural exchange or majority beliefs among all cultural groups. One group should not be able to limit other groups from societal influence. Yet, on social media, certain groups are able to cancel individuals or other groups with beliefs that differ from their own. This has happened when people have expressed opinions on politics, business, and even pop culture. This spirit of general intolerance is hurtful to society because it limits the fresh insights of healthy discussion. As a result, cancel culture is where, quote, similarly minded individuals hear only what they wish to hear, and anything contrary to their line of thinking is deemed undesirable. Echo chambers cause individuals of certain belief systems to become more extreme in those belief systems without the healthy pushback of others. These divisions cause deeper and deeper divisions in our social structure until the point where businesses and professions can no longer bridge the gap. In a country that emphasizes the freedom of speech, diversity, and representation, cancel culture is a threat to businesses and careers of individuals who do not agree with mainstream thought. In early July of 2020, Goya Foods CEO Robert Uyu rubbed mainstream thought the wrong way when he publicly praised President Trump. His business immediately fell under the tides of public opinion and anger. People vowed not to support his brand, and the embattled chief executive called the backlash suppression of speech. But this should not have to be the case for people who want to express simple political opinions. In another instance, famous actress Gianna Carano was canceled when she compared being a conservative in America to being a Jew in Nazi Germany. She was fired from her job, and she faced serious backlash in both her private and professional life. These are just a couple examples of many instances. But what makes it worse is that these harmful opinions, though maybe out of line, are contrary to our foundational principles as a country. They are contrary to freedom of expression and freedom of speech. Yet society has found a way, without the help of government censorship, without the help of government control, to silence some individuals. And those who are silenced often find themselves social outcasts. The fear of becoming canceled, of becoming socially outcast, is a root cause of fear on public platforms, which in turn limits diversity. Francis Lee, a social justice activist from Seattle, stated in an article that, quote, "Activists are some of the judgiest people I've ever met, myself included. We work hard to expose injustice and oppression in the world, but among us, grace and forgiveness are hard to come by. It is a terrible thing to fear my own community members and to know that they're probably just as afraid of me." Cancel culture, in its very nature, makes accusation and guilt the same thing. As a result, it has cultivated an underlying current of fear among those expressing their opinions on social media. Lee goes on to state, if we are interested in building the mass movements needed to destroy mass oppression, our movements must include people not like us, people with whom we will never fully agree, and people with whom we have conflict. Change must be brought about through discussion among people of conflicting views and backgrounds. It should not be the discussion of a single group, all with similar backgrounds. When that happens, diversity is limited, and all American culture is not fully represented. Another major factor adding to this problem is the power that many social media companies have in controlling the views and ideas that gain dominance in mainstream culture. Big tech companies, who have unprecedented power over the most widely used social platforms of our times, are able to manipulate the flow of ideas through these platforms. Private, powerful entities such as Facebook, Twitter, and others can limit, control, and censor speech just as much or more than governmental entities. This gives them an unfair and unforeseen advantage over mainstream culture and, more importantly, politics. Alan Bukhari, the senior technology correspondent at Breitbart News, states that, quote, "Big tech has become the most powerful election influencing machine in American history. It is not an exaggeration to say that if the technologies of Silicon Valley are allowed to develop to their fullest extent, there will never be another free and fair election." When big tech giants, such as Facebook and Twitter, exercise this unprecedented social power, certain individuals and important ideologies become almost powerless in the marketplace of ideas. This limited participation in mainstream culture is more than contrary to our country's founding principles, which emphasize freedom of expression and freedom of inquiry. It is also leading the United States down a path toward more controlled speech and censorship. During my research, I studied the societal influences that led up to the communistic and socialist regimes of Italy and Germany. Various social and political consequences of expressing a view that opposed the totalitarian dictatorships were put on people who were deemed enemies of the state. Withdrawal was made of these people with these enemies, whether they disagreed with the state or they were Jews. Other citizens were socially pressured to reject them or cancel them, and a general fear of being rejected always permeated daily life. According to PEP tutor Amy Clare, this social pressure eventually reached the point where the rights and social freedoms of the typical citizen correlated to whether they were supporting or not supporting the individual in power. Now, I'm not specifically implying that America is doomed down this path in the next few years, but I do think it's important that we notice common trends and common patterns in countries that eventually saw the death or minimization of freedom and diversity. As Americans, we are thankful for the freedom we enjoy, and we should treat it with reverence. Democracy is built on the representation of the people in politics. It is kept balanced by diversity of thought, and cancel culture is contrary to this. As citizens of the United States, we not only have the right, but the duty to express concerns about our lives, our welfare, and our children's welfare. We should be able to express and discuss politics and morality openly and freely. So what can we do as Christians and as Americans to stop and act contrary to cancel culture? Well, first, be open-minded. Are your politics about what your family has always believed or what your friends think? Or are they what you truly believe to the best of your ability to reason? I'm sure that many here, myself included, are guilty of creating stubborn barriers around our fragile convictions about ourselves and the world. But these barriers do nothing but create walls of separation between ourselves and the truth. Trust me on this one. I found out the hard way. It's not fun to have an uncompromising worldview pried apart by the prongs of reason. But as James 3:17 states, quote, "The wisdom from above is first pure, full of mercy, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere." Wisdom is both impartial and open. It is considerate of every possibility, yet it is systematically bound by reason. Second, be rhetorical. Rhetoric is about finding the truth. Its methods do not involve demeaning or belittling opponents. Its methods do not involve ostracizing an idea or person because they seem too problematic or threatening to your comfortable core values. Rhetoric is about discovering the truth, no matter how hard, no matter how painful, no matter how humiliating. In 2 Timothy, we are commanded to know the truth so that we are presentable to God. 2 Timothy 2:15 states, "Do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a worker who does not need to be ashamed and who correctly handles the word of truth." It's a big responsibility to take care of the truth. But as Americans and as Christians, we have a responsibility to uphold and diligently seek out the truth. Cancel culture threatens our means to do this because it continually minimizes the variety of speech that is tolerated in the public forum. And though it is often viewed as a weapon of the minority, it is completely contrary to social change and justice. As Francis Lee pointed out, if we want social change, if we want to fight racism and sexism, we need to work with people of differing opinions, people not like us, and people with whom we will never fully agree. I'm sure that everyone here is thankful for the freedom they enjoy. So let's not abuse it. Let's cherish it. As one prayer for social justice has it, quote, "Almighty God, who has created man in thine own image, grant us grace fearlessly to contend against evil and to make no peace with oppression, and that we may reverently use our freedom. Help us to employ it in the maintenance of justice among men and nations, to the glory of thy holy name," end quote. We must treat our freedom reverently. This means toleration and grace, not necessarily acceptance, but the tact to engage, argue respectfully, and to treat other humans as creatures in God's image. Thank you.